Episode 8 of Star Trek Picard has been down for us. This one certainly had a lot of great scenes in it, so let's dive in and review the episode. Hey everyone, my name is Captain Jack and welcome to Trek Central. Today we'll be reviewing Star Trek Picard Episode 8 titled Broken Pieces. This episode finally saw Shoji make her way onto La Sirena. As we always like to remind you, this episode will contain spoilers for Star Trek Picard, therefore if you've not seen this episode yet then turn away now. Also, this does apply to the entire season, so make it as you will. You have been warned. If you're new to Trek Central, then we'd kindly ask you to consider subscribing to the channel as we continue to deliver you brand new Star Trek videos every week. Alright, with that out of the way, let's dive into today's episode. With the actual relaxing break of an episode in episode 7 Nepenthe behind us, we're going full swing into the final 3 episodes of the premiere season of Picard. The start of this episode very much reminded me of the first episode of the series, with some absolutely gorgeous shots of space, and not only your usual displays of gaseous clouds and stars, but also a star system with 8 stars. This particular system is expanded on throughout the episode, but we go down to a planet within the system, Aya, better known as the Grief World. The symbols that the disordered XPs were writing on the walls was actually this very star system, showing 8 circles orbiting the planet of Aya, and what else did we hear contain the number 8? Of course, the Conclave of 8. Whereas Raffi and most of the fanbase assumed this consisted of 8 members, it was actually a location, and was about the 8 stars within this system. Now this is actually an ancient civilization that put these stars here to draw attention to their warning that they left behind. And of course it isn't a Star Trek Picard episode without the first scene being a flashback, which is what we get. A group of Romulans are surrounding an object called the Adonishment to receive a warning of an old civilization. This civilization had created synthetic life, which evolved beyond them and eventually wiped them out. But they made this planet and the entire star system to warn other civilizations of what happens when you create synthetic life forms. However, this warning was so horrifying, it causes most of the agents to go mad, with some shooting themselves, others bashing their heads into rocks, and some even ripping their own face apart. It's a little bit gruesome, but we've kind of come to expect that from modern Star Trek now with these very gorish scenes. Now as a sci-fi fan myself, I get some very Geth vibes from the Mass Effect series in this, synthetic life forms which rove above their masters and almost destroyed them. We also find out Ramda, the XB which we've originally seen in a couple of episodes ago, was a part of this group of Zhat Vash agents, which are all female, possibly linking them to their rivals, the Quat Malat. And with Ramda being one of the Zhat Vash agents, we also get that she is the aunt of Narissa and Narek. Narissa for the first time in this entire series actually seems to share some care and love towards her aunt, which makes Narissa such a more interesting character. Again, we're building on the character here. Originally Narissa's a bit one-dimensional, but here she works really well. A small issue I had with last week's episode, and by small I mean minor, was the Fenris Ranger SOS tag which Eleanor picked up. Why was it there? Well, the room Eleanor was in was actually Hugh's office, and as Seven comes in to save Eleanor, she asks, "Where's Hugh?" So Seven and Hugh have obviously met before, and it seems like the Seven was just hands these calling cards out to all her friends. Now talking about 7 of 9 this episode, personally I feel like she was slightly underused for the most part. While yes, it's great to have Jerry Ryan back, and I have a feeling she'll be used in episodes 9 and 10, I feel like she could have done more in this episode. We get the scenes many of us were looking forward to, that being Seven activating the Borg cube in order to throw the Romulans off of it. However, it still feels that the scenes on the Borg cube were very short. Mainly because this episode focused on the crew of La Sirena, and also figuring out the mysteries of Rios and synthetic life forms. Seven does activate the cube in sort of a mini collective. Sadly, she does not get to use any of the Borg drones, and as Narissa ejects them into space, which in my opinion was kinda sad to see, but it does connect with Seven's earlier point of being against the drones assimilating people. The Borg cube enters a regeneration phase thanks to Seven, which actually repairs most of the damage the cube sustained. We see the whole exterior being repaired by nanoprobes. At first I was a little put off by this, but then again after watching the scene, it actually works really well. I'd be interested in hearing your opinions on this, as the regeneration animation of the Borg cube has changed since the Next Generation. At least Seven does not actually become the Borg Queen, as we see towards the end that she is disconnected by saying that Annika still has work to do. My question is, what happens next? The Borg cube is almost useless now, it has no leader, and only a handful of XPs left to man it. Does it get abandoned? I don't know. Now back on board La Sirena, Picard is back aboard having just beamed up from Nepenthe, which is implied. I did find the initial Rios moment confusing at first, but the episode does make light of that and explains it in a great way, which we'll talk about more in a moment. The whole next scene of Picard defending Shoji and why he must contact Starfleet works really well. Thankfully, we get to see Admiral Clancy once again, as Picard communicates with her from his study on board the ship. The conversation between the two admirals does not change much, with Picard doing the "I told you so" routine. Admiral Clancy does inform Picard that a squadron will meet him at Deep Space 12. My mind immediately starts generating speculation and theories here, but I strongly think that the Enterprise is going to meet them, if they ever get to Deep Space 12, which as we know at the end of episode 8, might not be anytime soon. Clancy does tell Picard to shut the F up, which I know some might not like, but personally as someone who's normalised the swearing, it fits really well for this statement, especially as we already know the character is used to swearing at Picard thanks to episode 2. Throughout this episode, we get some real great levity in the form of the emergency holograms. As Rios has isolated himself in his room, he has activated the holographic crew to work on the ship. We don't only get some new ones, but also names to mostly all of them. Another interesting thing to note is the reason why they all look like Rios and have his characteristics is that he used the self-scan mode when setting up the system. The emergency navigation hologram is called Enoch, and also has the jarring Irish positive hologram from earlier this season. I will say that after hearing his voice more, I don't mind his accent, and his overwhelming positivity actually put a smile on my face. And we finally get to see an emergency engineering hologram, also known as Ian. As you might have guessed, he is Scottish. We get a Scottish engineer joke in the first season of Discovery, so it's nice to see it here as well. The accent also gets mocked by Raffi as not being even a language, which I know some will find quite funny. The whole segment of Raffi working with the holograms of Rios to figure out what has happened in his past worked really well. For me, this is really creative writing by Michael Chabon here, as writing this must have been really complicated to make sure it flows properly. Each hologram is essentially a separate character of their own, but still connected back to the main character of Rios. Let's talk about Rios for a moment. It is revealed to us that his captain, Alonso Vandermeer, and him actually made first contact with synthetic life from Shoji's homeworld, in the form of her brother and her sister who was named Jana. However, Zhat Vash caught up through Commodore O and ordered Rios' captain to execute them, else the USS Ibn Majad will be destroyed with all hands. The captain did so and then turned the phaser on himself, committing suicide believing that Starfleet had betrayed him. The whole writing design around this plot point works really well. Immediately upon meeting Rios early in the season, I wanted to learn more about his backstory. Thankfully we now have it, which works really well for me. Whether more will come of this remains to be seen, however I loved it. Towards the end of this episode, we get to see a Romulan fleet as amassed outside the Borg Cube, as Narissa plans to leave and track the synthetic homeworld. Narissa actually gets ambushed by XBs who are very much pissed about what is going on, as I would imagine, and they actually kill her lieutenant. Narissa as usual managed to escape, which is kind of annoying. I mean, come on, can nothing kill this evil character? Hopefully she has some sort of meaningful death. One of the best segments in episode 8 for me was Picard and Shoji's little discussion about Data. Hearing Picard talk about Commander Data and what he meant to Jean-Luc was great, as when you've watched The Next Generation and the follow-up movies, this all connects, makes sense, and works really well. For some reason, I personally feel like we haven't seen the last of Commander Data in the series of Star Trek Picard. Who knows, he could, or in some form of him, could be waiting on this mysterious synthetic homeworld the crew are currently travelling towards. Before I do forget, I must talk about Jurati's scenes as obviously they are pivotal to this episode. Her moment with Picard is daunting, as she reveals she did indeed kill Bruce Maddox because of what she learned from Commodore O's mind meld. Oddly, Picard does not really make the connection that this is a mind meld. I thought he'd mention it having experienced one himself, but I guess it's kind of not important to the conversation at hand. Interestingly, Jurati has a blocker which means she can't talk about the vision very much, at least the details surrounding it. The whole moment here really expands on her character and does super well for me. Picard's connection to her and the little sympathy he shows does work well, even though she ultimately admits to killing Maddox and that she'll hand herself into custody at Deep Space 12. The point of hell will come again is a little bit creepy, but when you connect it with the plot of the synthetic lifeforms going out of control, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment, it does make sense. I will say that Jurati's interactions with Shoji worked really well and were beautiful to watch and listen to. Here we are seeing a scientist who has dreamed her whole life of meeting a synthetic lifeform like Shoji. Sadly she never got a chance with Daj, but here we are. For the moment I did think a fight was going to break out between them, but luckily it did not, and the two seem to have slightly bonded in a weird type of fashion. Now throughout this episode, the whole plot of synthetic life and why it must be destroyed by Zhat Vash comes to fruition. While it was also revealed that the Romulans were behind the attack on Mars, as many of us originally speculated, the reason for doing so is made more clear, and how. This ancient civilization, which we mentioned earlier in this review, left behind a warning that said, "Do not do what we did, we created Sims and they evolved past the threshold. Rios actually makes a comparison to Zephyr Cochrane's warp field threshold, and we all know what's happened when you pass that. It's revealed that the Romulans took the message a little over the top, creating the Order of the Zhat Vash and sought to exterminate all synthetic life. They became super worried when Dr. Noonien Sung started creating synthetic life forms like Commander Data, Lore, and B4. This led to Commodore O, who is half Vulcan half Romulan, becoming a mole inside of Starfleet, eventually reaching the rank of Commodore and holding the position of head of Starfleet security by the time of 2381 it seems. This led to her being in the perfect position to be involved with the attack on Mars, which resulted in the Federation banning all synthetic life forms, giving the Zhat Vash exactly what they wanted. More of the plot will evolve around and come to life as we head into episode 9 and 10, most likely of how Starfleet is now getting involved it seems. Just before the end of this episode, and after Shoji's attempted hijack, we get this great scene between Rios and Picard, which just resonates Jean-Luc Picard's energy from the next generation. This for me really goes up there with one of his great speeches about what is right and what is wrong. Picard speaks about how they have the power to make the right choice when it comes down to what to do about synthetic life, compared to what the ancient civilization did and also Starfleet. Hopefully the future is made true and things do go to plan correctly. Now in an act of desperation, Shoji hijacks La Serena in an attempt to get to her home as fast as possible. This does not go to plan, as Rios actually has safeguards in place for a rather unique override code. This bit of detail works well, because after thinking about sci-fi, it kinda makes sense that a random stranger can't control everyone's starship. Seriously, passwords and security people. Finally at the end, we get Picard sat in La Serena's captain's chair, but he can't operate the controls of a holo interface. I find this quite funny in a way, as back in the days of the Enterprise, everything was touchscreen. However, holo controls are all the fashion now, and therefore must be slightly foreign to Jean-Luc, even though he can operate some holographic interfaces. Shoji, with Rios' permission, sets course and they begin their journey to the new planet. The episode ends there, but not revealing that Narek was waiting outside the transwarp conduit the whole time. Okay, some finishing notes from us. Overall, I really liked this episode. At first, I thought it might have been a little bit of a drag, as for me, episode 8 appeared like it would have to do a lot of clearing up before the two-part season final of Star Trek Picard. Luckily it did not, and instead worked super well. I still stand by the point that 7 of 9 felt underused in this episode, and maybe that is where the episode ultimately suffers for me. Sadly, there was no real mention of doing anything about Hugh, so he's definitely dead, which is a shame as I expected something more in this episode, but oh well, I guess it's time to move on. What stuck out really well for me in this episode was the character of Rios and his many holograms. His story worked super well here, and complemented the whole episode well. A truly well written episode, and it's what I've come to expect from Michael Chabon, and he really delivered it well. The whole plot around synthetic life forms and the attack on Mars has really come to fruition throughout episode 8, and finally we've got that added lore here, which everything makes a lot more sense. Hopefully episode 9 and 10 continue to build on it, but I'm sure we'll break down the previews and discuss more of that as we head into next week. That's it from us here on Trek Central for today. Remember to share your thoughts on episode 8 via the comment section below. We're always interested in your opinions. If you want to keep up to date on all things Star Trek news, lore and more, then make sure to subscribe to Trek Central here on YouTube. You can also follow us on social media for daily updates, visit our website, or even join our brand new community Discord server. For now, I've been Captain Jack, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.